originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Matt Maloney. I am happy to continue the conversation today with my friend and someone who's a great leader that we learned about on the last episode, Mr. Mark Naiman. If you missed the last episode, go back and stream it. What we learned about Mark in the last episode, and some of these were descriptions that I had of Mark if you did miss it, but Mark is a bold and expressive leader. He's genuine. He immediately makes you feel welcome. He's got this infectious smile. He's passionate and convicted about what he's doing in his business community, and we learned about the organization that he's now running, which is running these two large trade shows in the financial services industry. And he possesses a quality that is really instrumental in great leaders, and that is a quality that lends itself to being fun-loving, and it's humor. He's a funny guy, and it's a very powerful leadership characteristic. So, Mark, hey man, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Matt. They did tell me I had a face for radio for the last 20 years. So this, other than the fact you're recording this,
that's right. That's your next thing. Hey, we're already planning the next one. A visionary leader, you're already thinking to the next step of your career. So, hey, I thought we'd open up today just to break the ice. Hopefully most of our listeners listened to the first episode. If not, again, I've told them to go back and stream it, but let's ask some fun questions. So if you could go back in time and pick a different career, what would you choose?
That's a great one. Growing up, admittedly, Matt, I wanted to be a horror movie director.
Really?
I appreciate looking back on. I loved it. I loved scary movies when I was a little kid. The creepier, the better. And so for a long time, really wanted to be a horror movie director. Looking back on the last 20 years of my financial services career, I could tell you that's far scarier than anything I'd ever encountered in any movie I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
That aside, it's that was one of those things I don't think anybody, for the most part, grows up and says to themselves, I really want to be in the secondary financial receivable space. It's just it's a weird thing.
It's its own horror movie.
Horror movie director for sure.
So that's cool. So I got to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you what your favorite movie is, but before I ask you that question, so are you a Friday the 13th guy, a Halloween guy, a Nightmare on Elm Street, or are you more like, Alfred Hitchcock, or maybe all? I don't know.
Yeah, so I'll answer the first question, which was, am I more of the, you just named kind of I hesitate to use this, but that's kind of the holy trinity of horror, Matt.
It is.
Jason, Mike Myers, and Freddy. But if you saw last Halloween, I think you may have dipped and Leatherface may have slid in there.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I'll say the movie that absolutely scared me to death, and I loved horror movies when I was younger too. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It scared me. The original, it scared because it was so real. It was like, this is, in my mind, it was really happening. In my mind, it was like, that's real, and it scared me to death. So we could have a whole nother episode on that. I should bring on, I know some guys that were the financial backers for the Saw movies. Another story, another time. But those are pretty scary too, actually.
Well, it's funny. What was scary for us, Matt, I've tried several times to sit down and watch something scary with my children, whether it's Nightmare on Elm Street or a Friday the 13th. And you reach this point, my children are now 12 and 15, two boys, where you realize that it's not as scary as it was when you were a kid.
No.
I think that's a big commentary on how things have changed visually and from a stimulation standpoint.
I hate to, I'll bring this up. It has nothing to do with leadership. It has everything to do with horror movies. I went back and watched the Poltergeist movies. or Poltergeist movie. Maybe there's yes.
Yeah, it's still creepy.
It was so creepy, but the cinematography, is that right? I think that's right.
Special effects. It's the special effects where it's bad. The tree is like
it's bad.
Flimsy limb coming off. It's just not good.
It's not good. It looked fake. It was like, are those plastic figurines? What is that? Like, it was bad. Anyways, all right. So another fun question. I said this a moment ago. What is your favorite movie? This is pressure because this is pressure, but.
Matt, my wife made sure that I answered all of your questions directly. This is the one that I have to answer with. That's like asking my wife to choose her favorite child. Ooh. We've got to get into genres. We've got to break it down.
Yeah, you're right.
There is no possible way I could just say that one.
Okay, fair enough. I'll go with you on that one. But you're not getting out of this one. You're not getting out of this one. Who would play you in a movie about your life?
Definitely Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I mean, the physical similarities are immediately apparent there.
No doubt.
Second choice would probably be a younger Sean Connery. But I mean, these are all speculations here.
Yeah, I mean, but that's kind of a given, right? I mean, I suppose with you, that's a given.
100%.
Yeah. You know, I can kind of see both of those a little bit. Merged together.
Definitely the only Rock.
The balding is the Rock.
Yeah.
You're very smooth talker, like, and Sean Connery was like the smoothest man alive. I mean, he was the first, he is the Dos Equis commercial, the most interesting man in the world. All right. Very good. Well, so let's dial it back in, and I'd love the audience to know. I mean, I know your family, but I'd like the audience to know a little bit about your family, and maybe even before you talk about your immediate family, where did you grow up? Like, where did you grow up at, and then how did you come to meet your wife? And
please try to keep me encompassed here, Matt, because I have a tendency to go wildly off the reservation. Let me start back. I grew up in San Diego. My family is actually, I'm fourth generation San Diegan. My great-great-grandfather moved out here at the turn of the 1900s and been out here ever since. My kids, fifth generation. My kids are currently going to the exact same elementary school, junior high, and high school public schools that I went to when I was a kid. Grew up here in a little neighborhood called Del Cerro, Allied Gardens, San Carlos area. And it's... as I mentioned earlier, Matt, I knew very early on that I was not an athlete. I was a mathlete. 10th grade, I tried out for the wrestling team. And the majority reason, there was a girl, Anna Dotrin, never forget her. If you're out there, Anna, shout out to you, who I kind of had a little crush on. I just, was tomboyish kind of crush. I liked her. And the first wrestling practice, I'm there, I'm geared up. She's my partner. And admittedly, she was bigger than I was. I was a pipsqueak until I was in my junior, senior year. And the next thing I remember, I am on the mat. I am in excruciating pain. I don't even know what's happened. It's like immediate tap out. She crushed me, absolutely demolished me. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, oh yeah, wrestling's not for me. Certainly not. And that was really that was kind of, the
did that change your perspective on Anna?
Not really. No, it was more of a, I thought
you might have fallen more in love with her.
Me.
I thought
she loved me so hard. And yes, I took some, there were some laughs, but in retrospect, I don't know what I was thinking in the first place. That being said, right, I go off to college. And my freshman year in college, I am out quite late at a party, and I come home to a friend's apartment, and by now it's 5:00, maybe 5:30 a.m. And I am walking home to the dorms. And as the sun is rising, I realize this story seems ridiculous. My wife can confirm it. I see from across the parking lot, my now wife, is sitting downstairs with what was her suite mate. And I guess their suite mates were being loud. And so they came downstairs to drink some morning orange juice. And here comes this shambling creature from across the parking lot. And I I just kind of struck up a conversation with her. And that was in 1994.
Wow. I love it.
Admittedly, I was gonna bring a picture to like share. Maybe if you have me back, I might share it with you. But I can tell you that the first 8 years of us dating, maybe a little less, was very kind of difficult.
Long distance, or were you able together, or long? I mean, was it long distance or no?
Oh, no. We met.
Okay.
We met. I'm sorry, I missed that part. I completely glossed over the fact that we met in Tucson, Arizona. We both went to school at
Okay, that's where you were both at. Okay, yeah.
Totally story jump there. And so we find out we're both from San Diego. I come home, and again, this is Mark Naiman in 18, 19 years old. I look quite a bit different, no beard. And as a parent of 2 boys, I can tell you, if Mark Naiman 20 years past had walked into Mark Naiman now's house and he had 2 daughters, I'd probably not like Mark Naiman so much either. So right, all's well that ends well. But the funny story behind this is that growing up, my wife was a major athlete. She played soccer in high school. She got a scholarship, which she turned down, and ended up at University of Arizona. And her grandmother had really been encouraging her to start dating and get a boyfriend and all these types of things. And so keeping in mind that my grandmother happened to work at a local hair salon here in San Diego called Checkers. And for 15 or 16 years, my wife's grandmother had gone to that same hair salon, and they had traded stories about grandchildren and so forth and so on. And so freshman year, Holly sends a picture back home to her grandmother and says, "Hey, take a look at this boy I'm dating." Her grandmother walks into the salon one day and says to my grandmother, both now passed on, "Hey, my granddaughter has a boyfriend." And she shows the picture of Holly holding me, and my grandmother says, "That's my grandson." And
that
so
is great.
It was a very strange situation, Matt, in the sense that our grandmothers really supported us through those early years. Mark didn't have a strong career, and my wife's parents were not as supportive. I'm happy to report that here we are now.
All is well.
More than 20 years later, it's not just well, but things have a way of working themselves out.
Yeah.
My wife hung the moon, and if there's anyone, here I'm going to loop back to the previous podcast. If there's any leader I look up to on a daily basis, it's my wife for leading the family. She is truly the CEO of Mom Incorporated.
Yeah.
And I feel fortunate that she's been able to raise my 2 knucklehead sons and give them that type of support while I'm doing what I've always done, which is show up and be creative on the job.
That's great. That's a great story. That's amazing how your grandmother and her grandmother were buds basically at the hair salon.
It was weird.
That's bizarre. I love that. That's a great story. Well, thanks for sharing that. So how old are you? So you've been married how long now? Did you say?
We've been married now, just had our 18-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
And
And your boys are, you said, how old are they again? 12 and 15?
So Zachary 15, Jacob 12, about to turn 13 next week. That's you want to talk about challenging, Matt. My wife lives in a house full of boys. I got older. I never really grew up. So admittedly, I know that
she has 3 children. She has 3 children.
That's right. She
with you.
And 2 dogs. So
and 2 dogs.
It's really challenging. Yeah.
So let's dial it over to a question that I have, and I've been wanting to understand from your youth and where you grew up. Is there somebody in your youth that set an example of leadership for you, or someone that stands out that you can look back to and say, this person did have an impact on me, and here's why?
Yeah. I thought about this question a lot, Matt. And as you know, there's so many people I could say that had, a positive influence, someone that impacted me personally. The one I'm going to bring up today is Lillian Schaefer. Lillian Schaefer was my 3rd grade teacher. Admittedly, in 3rd grade, I'm not proud of this, but I'm going to share this story. for whatever reason, as a young boisterous child, I was also class clown senior year. That may give you some indication.
Yeah. I can see that.
Came from. I called my third grade teacher, Lillian Schaefer, and if she's listening to this, she already knows I'm very sorry, an F word, old lady. I was in third grade. She immediately called my mother and said, look, I'm not really upset that he used profanity, but I am upset that he called me an old lady. She was at my wedding. I still talk to Lillian Schaefer to this day.
That is a great story.
When I graduated college and moved home to San Diego before I got into financial receivables and the receivables recovery market, I tried my hand at teaching, and I can tell you right now, Matt, that to all of my children's teachers, to my friends that are teachers, they know that I have tremendous respect for that craft. It is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, job working within the bureaucracy of education.
Yeah, no doubt.
And the value of what you're providing. So I digress. I really, really, I think as a young child understood how important teachers were as a result of Lillian Schaefer connecting with my troublesome, 8-year-old self, and looking back on that, I never forgot it, and I still talk to her to this day. So that's definitely
really a good story
on my life.
Yeah, teachers have such a profound impact on the lives of children, and they know it, but they never know what that impact is, and sometimes that impact isn't realized by the individual until years, maybe decades later. But I've had several guests on this show that have talked about teachers or coaches in their youth that had a profound impact on them, and it's a profession that is highly underpaid, frankly, and not celebrated enough.
Way underpaid, and yeah, it's really a shame. But that's not the point of this particular podcast. And again, to circle back on a positive note, in some ways, taking on the ability to provide this education, as I mentioned, edutainment, is in some ways teaching. But I'm not subject to the bureaucracy of the state board of education.
Yeah, well, that's great. I love how you tied that together. That's really good. So if I know you, I know you've got goals for yourself and what you're doing. I know, what we kind of shared on the last podcast a little bit about what some of the goals are of the business, but right now where you're at, I think all of us, all men, women alike, especially those kind of in our middle years here, 40s, we're looking at the second half of our life and we're saying, hey, what are my goals going to be the second half of my life? Is there anything that you would like to share with the audience that today you have some current goals or just things that are sitting heavy on your heart or mind saying, I really want to make sure that I accomplish this, and maybe perhaps these are the things that I'm doing right now as I'm moving towards that?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I think that in the short term, getting both of my kids into college, if that's the route they choose to go, it's looking pretty good. And making sure that in that time frame, being back in control of an organization allows me to properly plan. As you know, my wife has attended or been a presence. In fact, most of the time, the first question out of anybody's mouth at these trade shows when I show up is, "Hey, Mark, great to see you. Where's Holly?" And
that's right, always.
From a 5-year plan, I'd really like to see, and I think we're kind of taking steps now so that my wife does have more of an active role in the planning of these events. And,
that's great.
And again, she spent 20 years in the restaurant and nightclub industry, and so from an entertainment perspective, from a food and beverage, from a vast granular detail, these are all things that my wife, as she worked right up until we had kids, and my wife wants to work, but also takes her responsibilities as mom, CEO of Mom Enterprises as that is the first job. And so being able within the next 2 to 5 years, as my kids get older and start, looking at college and moving out of the house, getting her more involved in the business, and then not losing sight of the fact that sometime after that, I'd love to be able to travel around, not even the world, just the United States. We could get in
there's so much to see here.
RV and just drive around the U.S. And, I keep things relative. We go on vacations multiple times a year as a family. So for me, Matt, as long as I can keep that up as long as possible and, have the ability to see beyond my kids out of the house, I think that's my next big. You had mentioned we'd reach like middle age. I think when the kids are gone is when I start feeling that like, man, I don't have anybody to yell at anymore or make crude jokes with.
That's right.
I think that's what I'm looking. I can't see far beyond that, but I hope to spend.
I think every person listening always likes to hear about, does our guest have a specific motto or a quote or scripture or creed or whatever I say that you live by, but not necessarily live by, but maybe something that just resonates with you. Say, hey, this really resonates with me, and it's kind of a guiding compass, whether it's something that's guiding to you right now or maybe it's a lifelong thing. Do you have one of those?
I realize it's simple, it's basic, but I think it goes a long way. And it's don't be a jerk. Read between the lines on that one. And I realize that seems silly and crude at the end of the day, but it's a little more impactful with two teenage boys than, hey guys, be kind.
And I love your quote being "Don't be a jerk" is so simplistic, but it cuts right to the heart of it, right?
Right. And what I was trying to establish there is that, with all the challenges my kids are faced with in school, I've never gotten a call that they're bullying someone. I've never gotten a call that they've been, stealing from someone. I've never gotten a call that they're bullying someone on social media. And while my kids are certainly not angels and find themselves in the fair amount of boy trouble stuff, I think being kind and just realizing that people are people and you can have a conversation with anyone. It doesn't matter. I feel very fortunate. We're in an extremely diverse city. And it's never been my kids don't really have any kind of ethnic, stereotyping viewpoints because they are in such a kind of ethically diverse environment. And I, it's something that I feel very fortunate about.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So I got two questions here we're going to land the plane with. So if you could hop in the DeLorean, go back in time and see your younger self like Michael J. Fox did, and you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that advice be?
Yeah, delegate more. I'll tell you, one of my biggest challenges when I was, and I'm rolling the clock back 15, 16 years, getting a business off the ground. I think I had a strange inability to let go of things that I was very comfortable doing. And again, those things are really unimportant, granular daily responsibilities that I would say, well, this takes me 30 minutes to do. And instead of training someone over the course of a week or 2 weeks to do the same thing, I would hold on to those things.
Yeah. The mindset of just like, you know what, I'll just knock it out. I can do this. Let me whip that out. Boom, boom, boom.
I remember sitting down with Mike one day and him just coming completely unglued over the fact that I was unwilling to let some of these things go. So honestly, that's the piece of advice and it's hard, Matt, because in the moment looking and reflecting, you think of what would happen if something goes wrong. If I do it, it will be right. Not realizing that from a long-term perspective, not trusting others around you and not being able to delegate those types of things prevented me from probably focusing on more important things.
Yeah. And from growing quicker, right? It prevented your growth perhaps quicker because of that. And look, I'm a self-proclaimed control addict. And that's one of the things, truthfully, it's one of the things I struggle with so much. And it's like, and I just want to hold on to that. And it's not that I don't think the other person can do it. It's what you talked about. It's just, I can just knock this out quicker and I know exactly how to do it. But one of the things that and I've talked about this with friends and people that I'm in some C-suite roundtable groups with, and we share best practices and things we struggle with. And one of the things that we've talked about is it is important to train the next person, right? So you can train yourself up and you can train them up. Realize they're not necessarily going to do it exactly how you would do it because they don't have your brain, right? And that doesn't mean that the way they're doing it is wrong. It's just they're going to do it differently, and you need to be okay with that. As long as it's done correctly, you need to be okay with that. And so that's a thing that a lot of leaders struggle with. So that's good. All right. So last question, Mr. Naiman. When all the books are written about you one day, what do you really hope that they say about the type of leader or maybe even just the type of person you were?
I brought my kids out onto the back patio to ask them this very question. I did change it up a little bit because, admittedly, I don't know in 50 years if my kids are going to be reading books. I'm a huge book guy, so it saddens me, but I phrased it 50 years from now, you're watching a Netflix documentary about your dad. What does that have to say? My oldest son said, my father was a businessman by day, but at night was second in command to Chapo. He fabricates this wild, insane story. My youngest son, Jacob, comes out. We ask him the exact same question. Jacob says, my father currently, throws conferences and takes the family on vacation, and he makes money for the family, and he's very kind, and my boys are very different. But really, at the end of the day, Matt, it's I wish I could tell you that the things that we do on a daily basis in business are extraordinarily exciting. I think you and I both know they're not, which brings me to just a final story here. And for those listening, don't judge me too harshly here, but way back when I actually created, and it's still out there, I created a website called XXXExtremeRoosterCageFighting.com. It's just a landing page. There's no actual basis behind it. But, absolutely, it's out there. I had business cards printed because when we go out to dinner, or my wife and I, we're date night, and you go out and you sit down with someone and you're across the table and they say, what do you do? And you say, I buy debt. First thing out of their mouth every time. You want to buy mine?
That's true.
That's lame. Nobody wants to hear about it. So I conjured up the fact that we sold custom rooster robes and embroidered rooster robes.
Oh, I love it.
I love it. No animals harmed in this business, but the website exists. I have business cards, and it just provides
classic.
That creative icebreaker that people are interested in talking about. And admittedly, I read way too much about roosters. And
oh yeah, of course you had to know about it, because if you really come across someone who knows about roosters, you better have the knowledge.
The core of this is just simply that, what we do is a necessary ecosystem within the country. And you and I could sit and talk about this for 45 minutes. I just don't think it's going to lead the very interested listeners. What is interesting is that the business itself has definitely allowed me to support my family, has allowed hundreds of people in this space to support their families. And these trade shows are probably one of the best places to both get educated and make those meaningful network connections that it allows me to kind of shift gears out of that to a larger, bigger picture, Matt.
You just emphasized my point about one of the great characteristics and qualities of a great leader is to have humor. And that is really, really good. That is really good stuff that you shared.
I try, Matt.
So, hey, we are unfortunately out of time again. We could go on. We probably have 6, as you said before, 5 or 6 episodes on this. But listen, Mark, it's been a true treasure to have you on this podcast. And I hope that my audience today got a glimpse into look and learn about you and really took away some nice little acorns from some of your leadership lessons and just really the things that you're doing. I appreciate you sharing that. And thanks for taking the time to spend time with us. As we close out, I'll leave you with this quote from Johnny Coles: leading by example rather than by position is what distinguishes a person as a leader. Guys, to all of our subscribers out in podcast land, I hope today's episode was both empowering and inspirational. Until the next episode, I pray that our daily journeys are filled with opportunity to lift others up as we inspire one another and we aim to go above and beyond. Thanks, guys. Mark, thanks.
Our executive producer and host is Matt Maloney, President and CEO of FAM360. Strategic Communication Coordinator, Michelle Ducato. Production Assistance by Tin Dog Studios. Director, John Berland. Creative Assistant, Whitney Berland. Theme song, Connecting Dots by Curtis Cole, provided by Artlist. Please subscribe today and don't miss any of our weekly episodes.